Hey guys, welcome back to Predictapalooza. In this installment, I hope to reassemble a couple restored sets. First up, I'm focusing on mine that has some cabinet damage. I figured it would be a good set to kind of refresh my memory on how everything goes back together. I just finished cleaning the plastic band that goes around the CRT housing, and it was really nasty. Did the usual purple power or simple green or whatever kind of strong cleaner to get the bulk of the nicotine off. I've heard 409 and Fantastic work well too, and then I followed it up with just some plain old like ammonia based glass cleaner. I also cleaned up the channel cover a bit. These are nearly impossible to clean. Even if you just use water, if you rub too aggressively, it takes off the metallized coating that goes around the outside. This was already really deteriorated when I got it, so didn't really have much to lose there. And the numbers are almost always worn off. This, I think, should be bright yellow. Maybe we can get reproductions made someday. We shall see. And this goes behind it. It's a little yellowed. I tried cleaning it, but that's about as good as it gets. It's really not that visible when the thing's all back together anyways. It just provides a bit of back to the channel cover there. And then I'm going to work on the arms, which I de-rusted, and they need to be all polished up a bit, I guess. I mean, they're so far deteriorated. There's really no hope there, but I can make them look a little bit better. Eventually I will paint them. And then there is the CRT housing itself, which has been cleaned already. Slight change of plans. I seem to be doing that a lot lately. I figured as I've got this taken apart, it would be silly not to do something with the arms. So I used some steel wool, and then degreased them with some acetone, and then sprayed it with Rust-Oleum specialty bright metallic brass. It's a perfect day for spraying. It's about 80 degrees, moderate humidity. They dried in about 15 minutes, and here they are. I'll let them dry a bit longer before I start reassembling. To do that, you take the end that has 2 points sticking out, and it goes through that, and then you rotate it, and it fits back onto this piece here. And I see now that this could also use a bit of help, but that I'll leave for now. I don't want to take this thing that far apart to really get at that. I know guys that have had these brass plated. I've talked about it an awful lot. Yes, it can be done. It's not cheap. It would take time, and I don't want to deal with that right now. The great thing about this is this can easily be removed. It can be plated at any time, totally reversible, so I'm happy with it. For a few minutes of work and a few bucks in spray paint, it looks way better. Hang on, not so fast. There is one final bit of trim, and that is a cap to hide this mounting screw. Here's one of the originals. Standard 1-inch end cap. Similar to the arms, are made out of some type of steel, I believe, and then there's a brassy coating. It looks like brass plating on the reverse where it's been protected from the elements, but on the other side, they typically look miserable. Some pitting, and the coating, you can just kind of scrape it off. And if you try polishing, this will be down to gray metal in no time. And often they are missing. And often these fingers are mashed over. Why? Well, they might pop off over time, but also if anybody's ever had to open this up to work on it, I'm sure that's where damage and loss can come from. Luckily we have solutions, so it's a 1-inch end cap. They're still made. It's a fairly easy thing to find. I ordered a bunch from Granger. Didn't cost too much, but they're steel. I could spray paint them with the same metallic paint. Look fine. Pop it on, and away we go. But there is another option. TV Restorer guy, the same guy that makes the reproduction cup plates, also has real brass end caps, and I picked up a few. So those are my two options for you. steel from Granger or brass from TV Restorer Guy. Now turning my attention back to the cabinet, which is rusty and bent a little bit, but there's another issue, which is that one of the feet is missing. I want to address that right now. It's not hard to find feet that are just about the same, although the color is different. It's just about the same size and height and hole diameter, but the originals were riveted on, so I need to break that off, and then I can just use a screw and a nut and a washer to seat them on, which leaves me with the dilemma of, do I just replace one, retaining as much of the original as possible, or replace all of them so they match? Oh, it's one of those things, once it's all back together and assembled, nobody's going to want to take it apart again to remove the other 3 feet. However, I gotta say, since the other 3 are pretty sound and on there tight, I will leave them. At some point, when I paint this, I will probably remove them, because it'd be a pain to kind of mask them off and stuff and paint around them. So for now, we'll just get that guy on there. I'd be very happy to not have the set wobbling around anymore. Well, I'll have to stop calling this the Bent Neck Princess, because it is no longer bent. Or at least it's a lot less bent. I found a shovel with a sturdy 6-foot long wooden shaft on it, put it in the hole and yanked over, and actually was able to almost completely eliminate the deformation. There's a little bit of a dimple right about here, but otherwise we're looking pretty good. I then went ahead and put the CRT head on, and as I noted earlier, itself is off a little bit. You can see more of this screw head than this screw head, so it's not perfect. There's still a little bit of a lean towards that side, but it's a lot better than it was. So let's move on to reassembling this, because after all, I'm going to completely take it apart again at some point in the not too distant future and paint it. So why go crazy with trying to get everything perfect right now? I'm getting ready to put the tuner back in the cabinet, but before I do, I thought you might like to get a closer look at how the UHF option is hooked in. So down below here is standard VHF tuner, with the channel selector as the inner shaft and fine-tuning the outer. We have a RF amp and a local oscillator mixer tube, and the output of that goes to the IF board. That, I do believe, is the AGC capacitor for the RF front end. This is the optional and not very often seen UHF tuner, with a 6AF4 tube, which was super common back then for a UHF local oscillator. And I do believe there is a solid state diode inside for the mixer detector. Now, how this works is the UHF comes in via a separate antenna hookup, and this serves as a down converter, which is then fed into the VHF. It doesn't go directly from UHF to the IF frequency. It goes UHF to VHF to IF. And there's a special switch position on the tuner here, which will feed the signal in from this box rather than from the VHF antenna input. Also, there are a couple lights here. This light illuminates the VHF dial, but when you switch to UHF, this light turns off and this light turns on. I also want to illustrate how the tuning works, because I was mistaken about what kind of knob goes on here, because every one I've had, or at least all the ones I currently have, this knob is missing, and it's been said it is the single most difficult to replace part in a Predicta. There weren't very many made, and they seem to be fairly often missing, and there just aren't any replacements around. Okay, on the 21-inch sets with UHF, there's a big knob that has a built-in gear reduction, or vernier drive, with something like a 3-to-1 drive ratio. And I thought this had it too. And why would you need that? Because this is continuous tuning from channels 14 to 88. There are no detents. So you need to really finely adjust that knob. But this doesn't have that. This actually uses two separate knobs. There's a separate fine tuning knob and a coarse tuning knob. So this is the coarse tuning knob, and it's pretty hard to turn. But just about 3/4 of a rotation goes all the way through all those channels. And you're in the territory of, I think it's over 800 megahertz or something like that for UHF, or somewhere like 400 to 800 megahertz. It's way up there. So how do they, or what kind of a tuning capacitor do they have? Well, I believe it is this gizmo right here, which is like a Teflon disc of some sort, and then a metal disc. So when you tune, you can see that rotates around, forming a variable capacitor. Now, how does the fine tuning work? Well, notice there are springs holding these two discs closely together. The fine tuning works by having a little cam action and moving the discs relative to each other. So you don't need to change much to affect an oscillator operating in hundreds of megahertz. Let's check that out on the schematic here. The UHF is the dashed in box down here. There's a 6AF4 oscillator. There's a 1N82A diode for the mixer detector operation. And then down here are the variable caps. I do believe this is the fine tuning. Or maybe it's coarse tuning, I'm not sure. All I know is it says 1 to 4, so I presume that means 1 to 4 picofarad. That's the entire range. Then this one is marked. It's a little hard to tell from the parts diagram what's what, because I don't really label it too well. Oh, okay. So I was a little bit mistaken, I can see now. So that those discs there, that are moving it, that eccentric operation, that is the fine-tuning cap. The local oscillator cap is inside. And it looks like it's 2 outer plates and 1 inner plate, and that's all you need. And then it's probably for a bandpass filter on the other 2 boxes there. It gets kind of crazy when you get into frequencies that high, when you can just have you move something a little bit and you affect it. There are things called gimmick capacitors, which are just 2 wires twisted together, 2 insulated wires twisted together. That's all it takes. So, what am I going to do for knobs? I don't know. I thought I could take some Filco Transitone UHF knobs, because I have a couple of those. Those are their portable sets from a few years earlier, like around 55, 56. But those do have a vernier action. They just have a single shaft. They're not the concentric knobs I need. I can probably dig up something that will function, but it won't look quite right. Who knows? Maybe I'll get lucky. I do have boxes of knobs, so you never know. You never know. Meanwhile, I'm going to clean this and lube it and get it reinstalled. We are in the home stretch. I repaired the broken leads on the yoke plug. Just finished installing the speaker. All the cheap stamped type nuts have been replaced with traditional nuts. Next up, we are going to install the main chassis. I took all the wires and kind of looped them up around the top so they wouldn't be in the way. When I install that, I'll have to carefully get it lined up and into the cabinet. Then I need to install the power contrast volume, which goes right there, and then there are 2 nuts to hold that secure. And then I'll be plugging in the speaker and all these wires and the tuner to the main chassis, which is down here on the floor. And that's that. Next up, I'll pop back on the power contrast volume knobs and try powering it up. And here's a look at the set playing with some actual broadcast material. The interference you see is because of my very, very crude setup. Here's one thing I still need to do with this set is replace the twin lead for the VHF input. As is so often the case in this set, the ends were mangled, and I'm having to use some alligator clips to feed a signal in, which is not the best way to do things because it lends itself to picking up interference. But hey, it is working.
Cool out all the fevers.
A great sound, nice bright picture.
Drown out all the questions on people's lips.
So, I am going to put the back on this set and put it aside. Oh, hang on. Let's try the UHF tuner. I have not tried it yet. So you have this pointing up to the UHF position, and that engages the additional tuner. Now that is a little pilot light going inside there. And that uses a separate antenna input on the back here. This one is not mangled. Now, my over-the-air converter box can only do channels 3 and 4, whereas UHF is 14 to 83 or 88, something like that. But my test pattern generator can, so I'm going to hook that up to these inputs, and let's see if we can tune it in. Okay, let's go up to... interesting. And when you go from channel 13 to 14, something clicks in. I don't know, 26. That used to be a real UHF broadcast here. Guess that may be it. Let's see, what am I outputting? Well, easy way to tell. I can turn the level down. No, I think I'm picking up something else. Oh, there it is. Wow, that's really good. Even with a fairly weak input, I'm changing the level of my generator now. It's only at about 30% right now. Now that was just with coarse tuning. I'll try to see if I can manipulate the fine tuning and get it a little bit better. Because the sound is a little harsh. Not the cleanest sound, but the video looks pretty good. That's pretty cool. So if I wanted to, I could broadcast in the UHF band with one of my Agile modulators. We'll talk about more about that in the near future. Broadcasting, that is. But yeah, the UHF tuner does indeed work. Now back to Brian's set. Let's start working on reassembly and cosmetic issues. So his is in remarkable condition. No corrosion, the chassis was mint, the original brown paint is in very good condition. We'll do a little cleaning on this, get some of these smudges off the grill. But unfortunately, the screen cover is pretty trashed. Not only is there a crack right down the middle, but there are some major stress cracks along the bottom. I suspect this set took a tumble at some point and got whacked there and there, or something like that. Probably the nicest arms I've ever seen, too. I mean, or just in general, all the brassy stuff is in really good shape. Just a little bit of surface corrosion. He's missing one of the end caps. The other one's present. Alright, so what we're going to do, well, he picked up another set. We're going to swap the screen covers out, so I want to take this apart and remove the screen cover. I want to clean this. He has the original antenna, and it's all there, which is really, really rare. Of course, we've got the knobs, which are also in pretty good shape. Still has the original red inlaid painting. These are pretty much always cracked. And that is something else we are looking into, maybe getting reproductions made of. And the numbers are always worn off. So that's just the way it goes. Oh yeah, there is one other major issue. It needs 2 new feet. Both front feet are gone. So just like we did with the last cabinet, we're going to break off the remains, cut off the remains with a Dremel tool, and install 2 new feet. Now to do all that, I need to remove the CRT unit so I can work on the feet and such. To do that, you need to remove a Phillips screw, but hey, I can't really get at it. This plastic housing is really slipped down. And now that I look at it, this whole head unit is kind of bent back a bit. So, again, going with the impact theory about the screen cover damage, I think just like how my got knocked to the side, this head seems to have gotten knocked backwards. So, oh yeah, wow, you can really see it clear as day now. Yeah, there's a major angle going on there. So, well, and that's bent a little too. So while we're cleaning and disassembling this, see about straightening it out too. Now I have Brian's set powered back up, and this time with the CRT that it came with. And I think you can see with the crack down the middle, it'll be a little hard to watch. Still have a jitter problem though, so we gotta solve that before we can put the set back together. Even if we had the new screen cover. I'm hoping it won't be a long drawn out thing to try to figure out, but man, intermittents are the worst. Because it'll play just fine for quite a while, and then it won't. Earlier I thought it might be the controls, but I cleaned all the controls, checked the wiring. So it seemed like before when I would tap the controls I would lose sync, but now I'm tapping things now, and sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And I'm also using a tuner that came with the set, whereas previously I was using a tuner from another set, so the tuner's not an issue. I went over all the controls with the Oxid F5, and that helped smooth the action of the controls, but it did not eliminate the jitters. So I started working my way through the IF. Swapping out the first 2 IF tubes didn't make any difference, but the third one did. That is the 6AM8, which is also the detector. That seemed to eliminate the jitters. I'll let it run another half hour or so, and if no problems crop up, I'll declare it good to go, and then I'll start taking the head unit apart in preparation of swapping out the screen cover. Well, I figure why work on one CRT head unit when I can work on 2 at the same time. So this is Siggy's set, which we got running a while ago, and then that's Brian's, which I'm about to dismantle, so we can swap out the screen cover. Ziggy's is fine, but it needs a thorough cleaning. When I started out working on these sets, I wasn't planning on doing much cosmetic work at all. But then I got to thinking, some of the cleaning, like this needs to be cleaned on the inside, that's a bit beyond your typical owner. So I figured, well, I got these sets apart, I might as well make a little extra effort and clean them. So we're going to take this apart, we're going to clean it thoroughly. This needs to be polished inside and out, but there are no cracks, which is a nice thing to see. On this one, we're just going to remove the cover until the owner can come over here with his other set, and then we're going to do some swapping. I just finished removing the arms and the decorative band and the steel band that holds the whole thing together, so we can take a closer look inside. Now, remember, this set had been restored, and not only did they do electrical work, I can see that, well, at least somebody at some point did some work on this as well, because they cleaned it, but they didn't take it all apart when they cleaned it, so there's... at some point this thing must have been really covered in, again, what I assume is cigarette residue. There's still quite a buildup of it under where the band was, so I'll take care of that. You can also see on the inside of this cover how discolored it is. Now, it looks to me like somebody took this off and cleaned it at some point, but they left a ton of residue all around the edges. There's also a lot of fine scratches on this. I actually wondered, was it wet sanded at some point? Well, anyways, I'll do a basic going over with Novus number 2. Also, unfortunately, just noticed there are some fine stress cracks up in that corner. I don't know if you guys can really see it with all the other fines there. It's starting to kind of come down. Well, anyways, we'll clean it up as best we can and put it back together. Well, that's looking much better. It's not perfect. They rarely are. There are some scratches down here that could probably be wet sanded out. There's a weird blemish over here that's sort of in the plastic. I tried polishing from either side and it just didn't do anything. I suspect when the set is running it won't be visible though, so that's the important thing. And I went ahead and polished up all the ivory colored plastic too. Now the arms, they're pretty rough, especially this one. I took a photo, and I'm going to show it to the owner and see if he wants me to paint these. If he does, I will. If not, I'll just put them on as is. Meanwhile, let's move on to taking this one apart. I've already taken off the decorative band and the steel band that holds it all together, so we can take this off. Picture tube is dirty. I'll get some Windex on that, make it for a better viewing experience. It'll be a little bit brighter and a little bit clearer. As for this, boy, this set, something happened to this. The set might have fallen over, might have been dropped, might have been damaged in shipping. I don't know, the owner doesn't know. But not only is it cracked, both the ears on the bottom are broken off. So you have the nasty crack down the middle that makes it really unwatchable. Alright, very cool. So, immediately I could see this is an original Filco. And it also is the first gen 17-inch Filco, the 17 DAP4. Later they used the 17 DRP4. They also call it an SF17. I never noticed that before. I probably should have, because they refer to the 21-inch as an SF21. So, sure, the 17 should be an SF17. What is SF? I'm pretty sure it means short factor. In other words, it's got a short neck. That's probably a manufacturing code. Although that seems kind of late. That's almost that would be the 47th week of 1960. Which would be towards the end of the production run of these sets. So it kind of contradicts my theory about this being an early one. But one thing we can confirm for sure is this does not have the grounding hoop. That's why I was getting static sparks and getting shocked when I touched the metal frame, because this DAG is not grounded via any of these wires. It's grounded via this, going to the frame, going to the base, and then into the cabinet, and then into the circuitry. Terrible way to do it. I'm sure that's why they changed it at some point, where they have a hoop attached to one of these bits here that gets wired into this, and it goes to a grounded wire in the set. I'm not going to bother changing any of that, because hey, it's original, it works, leave it alone. And yes, that is how these high voltage connections were. They did not have a rubber boot over it. And there might very well be a charge between that and that. Let's grab a screwdriver and see, shall we? So we will do this, and we will go over towards... No, that's good. Usually when you have a picture tube hooked up to a set and everything is working well, when you turn the set off, most of the charge gets bled away because everything's operating and electrons are flowing back, and it kind of discharges itself as the set powers down. That's that collapsing dot you see fading away as a charge bleeding off. So I was fairly certain that this wouldn't have much of anything. Also, the fact that this was not grounded very well, or at all, also help it not build up a charge very well. Alrighty, so since I now have it completely apart, we can clean this a bit, because it is a little filthy underneath here. I'll dig up a couple screws. We will get this reassembled, and then we'll start putting this whole thing back together in the cabinet. Well, now, things just got a little bit more interesting, at least for me anyways, because I like the detective work sometimes and trying to figure out what happened to a set throughout its life. So one thing I noticed is that these wires, well, I've noticed on other sets that these wires are going under this hoop. There's a gap here, and the wires easily fit under there, and it helps kind of keep the leads dressed nicely so they're not sliding around. And that's why I've seen them on other sets that use the 17 DAP picture tube. And then I took a photo with this label because I thought it was kind of nice. I sent it to the owner saying, hey, you got an original Filco picture tube. But then I read it more closely. So a little notice in the middle. This tube is made only from new parts and materials except for the envelope, which prior to reuse is inspected and tested the same standards as a new envelope. What does that mean? This is a rebuild. The envelope is this glass jug. They rebuilt this. They put a new electron gun in this thing, which would explain why I can have a date code of late 1960, even though I'm pretty sure the DAP4s were used in the early runs, which would have been more like late 59, early 1960. So what I suspect is the original picture tube was replaced with a rebuild at some point, maybe in 61, 62. Maybe it was still under warranty. Maybe they took it to their authorized Filco dealer. Filco didn't yes, Filco went through a bankruptcy, and they were bought out by Ford, or Ford saved them. Filco didn't disappear. They were still making sets into the 60s. But they did stop making Predictas in 61-ish. So I think that is what happened. And that might explain why those screws were missing. Maybe whoever installed this rebuilt picture tube didn't bother to put those screws back in. It also explain why some of this is a little sloppy, like this high voltage lead should have been secured by this piece of masking tape, which isn't really doing anything. Oh, also the the insert is missing. There should be a piece of folded cardboard in there that helps keep the video lead away from the other wires. This stuff should not be this loose in here. These wires should be held in place underneath this, and there should be a cardboard sleeve in here. Yeah, this was definitely had stuff done to it. So it's not good to have these wires sliding around because they start rubbing off the DAG coating. So we'll take care of that. I'm not going to take off this band to run the wires through. That's a little... I think that would do more harm than good. Because I'd have to release tension on this, the picture tube could slip in the frame, and yeah, I don't want to do that. But I will... I might have a spare sleeve, or I can fabricate a new one from some cardstock. I finally have the chassis ready to go back into the cabinet. Cleaned up all the tubes, reinstalled the IF shield after coating it with some T9 corrosion inhibitor. Remembered to replace the line filter cap with the proper type of Type X capacitor, rated for across the line duty. Lubed up all the controls with F5. Dug up one of those folded cardboard inserts for the CRT to keep the video lead isolated. I've printed out the critical dress lead information that tells you how to hook up the various wires through these prongs to keep them... Well, it's supposed to minimize interference and distortion and crosstalk and stuff like that, so that's what we're going to do. Now, as for the tuner, all these tuners have a Type 47 bulb, incandescent bulb, that runs off the filament supply. They put a cardboard shroud over it with a hole in the end to focus the light on the back of the fine-tuning knob to make a nice backlit effect. Often, in these sets, that bulb is burned out because they're really hard to get at. The only way to replace it is take the back off the set, unmount the tuner, disconnect the wires from the tuner, and pull the whole thing out, and then pull this out, carefully remove that cardboard shroud, which is often kind of fused to the metal over time, and then you can finally replace your bulb and then put it all back together. That's a lot of work for a little light bulb. So I can understand why people didn't bother to replace them when they burned out. Well, I ordered up some LED number 47 bulb equivalents. Got them off of Amazon. They were advertised as being for pinball games and vintage electronics in general. They're supposed to be soft white. I expect they will be whiter than this bulb, which is more yellow. They should be arriving today, I hope. The bulbs have arrived, so let's do a little comparison. Here it is with the incandescent bulb. Let's do it with some reduced overhead lighting. Okay. Bulb kicks out a bit of light, but that little opening just kind of makes a not very bright spot. Some of these I've seen, instead of having it just be a small opening at the end, it's just a cylinder. So I could experiment with that, I suppose. And getting this off can be kind of tricky. It's not good. So the way they make these is they have a slit in the side, and ideally it comes off, but sometimes, especially if this corrodes, these really get stuck on there, and sometimes you just... Well, actually, this one is rusting a bit. I think it's because the cardboard traps moisture in there, and, well, that's what happens. Sometimes you just have to destroy them to get them off. Of course, not the hardest thing in the world to fabricate a replacement for. Alright, so here is the LED equivalent. Let's see what that looks like. Let's do it without the shroud for now. So let's put the fine-tuning knob on, which was cracked, by the way, and I used that same plastic cement to fix this one up like I did earlier. Yeah, it is whiter. Hard to say if it's brighter because I don't have the shroud on this one. But it is brighter, for sure, and it should last a lot longer. I'm inclined to go with it, as it is a bit diffused. I was worried it might be too intense and piercing, but with that, they do have a frosted white cap over it, which helps a lot. Let's try it with the shroud now. Yeah, I thought that might be an issue. So on this plastic version, there's a ring around it that protrudes, makes it larger than the original. So this shroud won't quite, well, a little bit of finesse. That having that slot helps. So it is being stressed and distressed a bit. Yeah, I don't want to damage this. So one easy way to make these shrouds is with some heat shrink tubing. If you get some large diameter stuff, I think I do, you can put it over it and shrink it up if need be, or if you get the perfect diameter, you won't even need to do that. Alright, let's shrink up the end a little bit. And finally, here is the LED bulb with a shroud on it. I think that's pretty similar to the original. Yeah, it's a little bit whiter. Putting the final touches on the reassembly. I have the chassis in place. Still need to secure with some screws. Checking my lead truss. I'm going to refer back to some reference photos I took when I got the set. And also doing some basic detailing up on top. It's painted metal, so I tell owners just do the same thing you do with your car. Car wax, basically. But for this first pass, since it's a little dirty, a little scratched up, I'm just using some scratch out and going over it. But again, just very lightly. I normally don't really detail sets. I leave that up to the owner. But I figure, well, I got to take it apart, spend a few minutes and clean it up. Plus, because this one looks so nice. One thing I wanted to point out too is the grease on this CRT support here. In the past, in fact, on my set just the other day, I completely removed all the old grease with degreaser and got it down to clean metal. And then I put on new grease, and you know what I've discovered? The head, it moves too well, moves too easily. The grease is too slick. And my buddy and I were talking about that the other day, because he did something similar, I think, with a tape deck. And the mechanism used to have kind of a slow move, and now it's just, or maybe, no, it was a turntable. Not a turntable mechanism, the tone arm. It was flopping around too much. Turns out that, yeah, you can get oil and greases with specific viscosity, and it's an easy way to make a nice smooth motion out of a mechanical system. So you can actually get like oil that's thick or grease that's thicker to actually make things not smooth, not move so smoothly. So on this one, I'm going to leave the old grease. I'm going to add a little bit more, but I'm going to leave what's there. And the stuff it's pretty thick, but it's not like it's dried out or anything. I think it was thick to begin with, because you want to have some resistance in there as you're moving the thing around. You don't want to just, flopping all over the place. Alright, so I'm going to do a little bit more cleaning here, and then pop the head on. Remember, we need to replace the screen cover. Can't do that until he shows up. But I definitely want to put it in place and wire it in to make sure everything is working, and I'll let the set play for a while. Also have to look to my reference photos to make sure I get the right knobs on this set, because some of these sets have white knobs and some have black. And at first I thought, well, it's a no-brainer. The white must go with the beige sets and the black would go with the brown sets. But then I looked at my beige set and it had a set of black knobs on it. So yeah, I want to make sure that all the right stuff goes with the right sets. I'm pretty darn sure, though, that goes with his set. And I know this channel pointer does. And it's a very, very nice example of one. Now, his set didn't have the back. Which is curious because the screws that hold the back on are present. But what we need to really work out... he did buy a reproduction. There's a place that makes them. They have like a laser cutout machine. Mostly they do radio backs, but they do predicted backs too. But I don't think it has the original antenna terminals with screws where you can attach a balun and feed a signal into it. When I got this set, this tuner input had been cut off and some spade terminals installed. I installed a new piece of twin lead and just left the ends undressed. I'll see when he gets here what's actually on the back and decide what we want to do. We may just feed this through slots in the back and just hardwire a balun right onto it so we can attach a signal source. I'm putting in the chassis screws now, which are these machine screws with captive star washers on them. And it's pretty obvious where they go, as there are noticeable scarring on the paint. Now, I had mentioned while taking all these apart that most of them were missing screws, and I was blaming lazy servicemen. Maybe that's not the case. So here's where I put one in. It had obvious scarring from the washer, as does that. But this hole doesn't really have it. Nor does that hole. So maybe there were only 3 chassis mounting screws in this thing originally. Now notice that on the tuner as well, there are normally 3 screws with washers, but only these 2 holes had marks from washers. That one didn't. I put a sheet metal screw in there just to secure the tuner, but when I went to count up my screws that I took out of the set, I didn't have that one. So yeah, I mean, there's no reason. You're not going to hurt anything by installing all these screws. I mean, I'm going to help secure it better, but I just wonder, were they trying to save a couple pennies? Did somebody just miss them? Was there a reason why they left them out? I don't know. Here it is, all back together, minus the new screen cover. And of course the black knobs were the right choice. Beige just looks silly. Now let's make sure it still works. Oh, and there's the illumination with that new LED bulb. It's subtle, but that's very similar to how it was with the real incandescent bulb. Horizontal needs a little tweaking. Hey, yes, it still works. Excellent.
What? What?
I need to tweak the height a little bit instead of filling the screen completely. I'll get my test pattern generator and double check the linearity and such, but alright. I think one of these is finally done. Brian, the set's owner, showed up with debutantes, and we just did a transplant of the screen cover onto the Princess. It was a success. Still talking about what to do with this. May restore it, may not. Obviously we need another screen cover for it now. Something else I wanted to show you is he bought a reproduction back, which is really, really nice quality. All laser cut out, including all the printed material. But what you don't get is you don't get the antenna terminals. There's the cutouts for them. And you don't get the power cord. So those would need to be scavenged from something else or fabricated or whatnot. So for now we just have the antenna lead sticking out the back. and power. So the one problem I just realized with that is with my cheater cord, it does not go in far enough to make contact with the power interlock. It might if I took the back off and put this on first and threaded the cord, although I don't think the plug will fit through that opening. So what I'm going to do now is hunt around and see if I have a cheater cord that doesn't have the ears on it and will fit through that opening, so we can do one final power up to make sure the set still works before he takes it home. To dig through all my old power cords to finally find one that fits through that hole in the back. Now let's make sure it still works.
Circus show, but a holiday for me is a rare occasion.
I heard old Bill had turned into a sideshow,
There
fella.
we go.
Can't say as how I approve. But I guess you got a kick out of seeing the circus, didn't you, young fella? Yes, sir, I sure did.
A little bit of fuzziness interference on the screen. That's because of alligator clips and whatnot back there. The owner picked up one of these HDMI to RF converter doohickeys, but it's got a connector on the end that I haven't seen before. It's got a fat pin in the middle, and I'm not sure what that hooks up to. Check out the plug on the back of this thing. I've never seen anything quite like that. Now, I'm not the most up-to-date with AV equipment. If any of you know, what the heck is that? Because what he wanted to do was take the output of this and go into the TV, and he picked up some of these balance, but the end of that does not fit into the end of that. So he's going to ask around on Facebook and whatnot and see if somebody can clue us in on how the heck is that all supposed to connect together. But meanwhile, got to plug off my converter box. So it's the first of the sets to be going home. First of many. And that is going to wrap it up for the Brian project. Hope you guys enjoyed this particular Predicta. We got a whole bunch more coming up. Thanks for watching.
We're thinking about making our move. Me and my 3 boys. Moving on a little farm, maybe.